Before I start talking about my research today, I wanted to share a little bit about how it was that I actually got here. So I'm going to take you back all the way to a typical day in the life of an undergrad student. So I was wandering around looking for something that I think most students are on this eternal quest to find. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the quest for food. And not just any kind of food, free food specifically. And so you can imagine my excitement when I walk into this room and I see a whole bunch of free food laid out on a table. And so I dash in, gobble up all the food, and just as I'm ready to head out, I think, maybe I should look around and see what this event here is all about. And so I did check it out, and it turned out that it was actually an assistive technology showcase. So it's a bit of a show and tell for a bunch of students there who had designed all kinds of assistive technologies and products, including a wayfinding device for blind people that I thought was really cool. And so I really stepped back and suddenly realized that I'd found my calling. I had always loved to build technologies, and that's why I had started in undergrad in computer science. I'd always wanted to make an impact on human health and quality of life, and so I had done a bioinformatics option so that I could understand a bit more about the human body. But there was something else as well. So right from when I was a little kid, and I'm sure my mom will smile as I'm saying this, I really believed in equal opportunity for everyone. That was something that really resonated strongly with me. And when I looked at the field of assistive technology, what I saw was really an opportunity to make an impact in the way that I wanted to make an impact, and in a way that was personally meaningful. And so I looked around to see, connect with people that were doing work in this area, and I landed at the Intelligent Assistive Technology and Systems Lab at the University of Toronto. I had graduated by now, and I was looking for a 3-month summer project. And there were a whole bunch of projects that they were working on, but one particularly stood out to me. And so what you're seeing here is the Intelligent Wheelchair Project. Let's see if I can get this pointer going. There it is. So that's a regular powered wheelchair that's outfitted with sensors. And the sensors detect obstacles, and that's kind of a representation of that there. And what the system does is automatically stop the wheelchair before the driver could crash into anything. So I looked at this project and I thought to myself, so you're telling me that I can drive around a power mobility device and crash test it and get paid for doing this? That sounded pretty awesome. And so I said, sign me up. And I started this project. And really at the beginning, it was really just a cool project that I wanted to be part of. But in a couple of weeks, it turned into a lot more than that. So I made a field trip to a nearby long-term care facility. This was actually my first visit to a long-term care facility. And I was really shocked to see the vast majority of long-term care residents were slumped over in their manual wheelchairs. They didn't have the strength to propel themselves. And powered wheelchairs would have been a good option for them because they would require less physical effort. But unfortunately, a lot of these residents had cognitive or visual impairments that prevented them from driving these powered wheelchairs safely. And so as a result, these individuals were excluded from any individual means of mobility. I saw this as a violation of a fundamental human right to mobility and freedom, and really decided that this was a lot more than just a 3-month summer project. And so I took off to beautiful British Columbia and started a PhD there in the area of intelligent wheelchairs. And what you're seeing there are different prototypes that I've developed over the last almost decade now, and several of my colleagues have also developed similar prototypes that we've tested in multiple facilities with older adults, long-term care with mild to moderate cognitive impairment. And so when Michelle contacted me for this talk, she talked about, so what can you say about gender differences in your studies? Now, I have to admit that we've never really been able to do any rigorous analysis in terms of gender or sex-related differences. Most of our studies were fairly small, so there were anywhere from 2 participants to 10 participants. It's actually quite challenging to recruit participants into these kinds of studies. And so I didn't really have any real rigorous analysis, but what I did do was email the research team and ask them about what they thought about what we could say with regards to gender differences. And it's perhaps not surprisingly, we all came up with similar observations. And so here's a few things that we came up with. So first of all, some of the females that we worked with had less familiarity with driving and navigation. And this was possibly because they'd never driven even a car before, and in some cases not even a bicycle. That's something we saw less in the male participants who had mostly driven cars before. Now, in the cases where we saw less familiarity with this technology, what we also saw was less confidence. So we saw female participants that hadn't been exposed saying, I'm not quite sure if I can do this, if I can use this powered wheelchair. However, we did give everyone the same training opportunities, and with even a few minutes of training, we found these same participants who were unfamiliar and not as confident saying, hey, you know what, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. I can do this. So this is even more interesting because what we didn't really observe was any performance differences. So regardless of whether these female participants had exposure or not, they still performed just as well as the other participants did. So I think the really interesting finding here is that in capturing gender diversity, we inadvertently captured a diversity in a completely different aspect that was unexpected, and that was in terms of prior driving experience. Now, the other thing that I do want to talk about, and this is really because I've done a lot of work as well in recruitment and retention of women in STEM, is this notion of the lack of confidence being a symptom of really this underlying problem of the lack of exposure. The reason I talk about this is because a lot of times when we talk about women in STEM and there not being enough women in STEM, we often talk about the problem being a lack of confidence. And as someone who's always been fairly confident in my own technical abilities, I strongly disagree with this. I guess I probably need to thank my parents because, well, growing up, I guess they were wise enough to buy me a bunch of Meccano sets and Legos and, and all kinds of athletic gear, probably because they noticed that I was spending more time building furniture for my doll houses rather than actually playing with the dolls. So that's really, I guess, a message here maybe that perhaps we shouldn't let those blue and pink packages in the toy stores dictate what kind of skills we nurture in our children. So that's all I have to say about research, but I do want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the other hat that I wear as a CEO of a startup. And of course, I really should talk about this because OBI gave me a bunch of money to start this company. So thank you, OBI. And what I'm really proud of as a CEO of this company is, as you can see, this is my team, and I'm really proud of us having an incredibly diverse team. I have a team member sitting right in the audience today as well. And fun fact, all the women that you see in the team are actually computer scientists and engineers, and all the designers on the team are actually men. So talk about breaking stereotypes, right? So I have to look at this and think, how did this all happen? And one thought that I really have is, one thing that really stood out to me was, this was never an agenda. I never really started this company thinking, you know what, I'm going to be the most diverse company in Toronto. I just really went for it. And I think this really brings me to the last point that I had, is that I've always really thought about diversity as a byproduct of creating an open and respectful atmosphere and environment rather than an agenda. The reason I say this is because I think there are a lot of organizations right now that really look at diversity as almost like a checkbox that they need to tick off. And so, I really want to say that there's really no point to introducing, 50% cabinets and, offering scholarships to entice minorities if they're just going to be disempowered when they enter our organizations. So I do want to share that when we first started as a company, I made everyone on the team think about the values, their own personal values, and what they wanted to bring into the company. And we identified values such as transparency, such as equal opportunity for everyone, as well as openness to change. And so I really urge everybody in this audience today to go think about, what kinds of values do you have in your team? Have you talked about what your values are? Because really, along with talking about empowerment, we also need to talk about stopping disempowerment. And I think that's ultimately what's going to lead to an increased diversity in all these fields that currently are in dire need of more diversity. Thank you very much.